You know, when you have a show about gratitude, you've got to be grateful for your sponsors. And in our life of gratitude, you know, we all have guides. Somebody that guided us through our lives, that made us appreciate those things that we have. And that's why I'm so delighted and so grateful for our sponsor, Life Guides. Life Guides is a peer-to-peer community that helps people navigate through their day-to-day stressors by providing a place of empathy, listening, wisdom, and support with a guide who has walked in your shoes, experiencing the same challenge or life experience as you. A true life guide. And because you're listening to our gratitude podcast, if you go to their website, lifeguides.com/schedule a demo and add the code HEALTHY2021. The code is HEALTHY2021 in the free text box. You'll get 2 months of their services for free. 2 months for free. So sign up, show your team you care, get a life guide, be grateful for those guides in your life, as I am grateful for our sponsor, Life Guides. Hey everybody, welcome to Leading with Gratitude Live. I'm your host, Chester Elton, the apostle of appreciation. I'm coming from the gratitude epicenter of the universe, the Old Forge Library in Old Forge, New York, in the Adirondacks, one of the most beautiful places on the planet. You know, we love our gratitude community. You join us from all over the world. It's amazing. Thank you so much. We say, give us 30 minutes. We'll give you 30 minutes of information, inspiration, and a roadmap to a life of gratitude at work and in your personal life. We're broadcasting live on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, and it's all brought to you by the amazing people at the Methods Network. You want to learn more about investing in your leadership, go to methodsof.com. There's all kinds of great courses there with Marshall Goldsmith, myself, Sally Helgeson, Martin Lindstrom. You get the idea. Invest in yourself. Go to methodsof.com. Now, our show is based on our best-selling book, Leading with Gratitude. I encourage you, available to find bookstores everywhere. But I want to introduce you to a new friend that we've made just in the last little while. His name is Chris Singleton, and he's got an amazing story that he's going to share with us here today. Let me tell you a little bit about our new friend, Chris Singleton. Chris Singleton is a former minor league baseball player drafted by the Chicago Cubs. He became a nationally renowned speaker with a message of resilience, forgiveness, and unity following the loss of his mother in the 2015 Mother Emanuel Church tragedy in Charleston, South Carolina. Chris now shares his message with over 60 organizations annually, and his clients include Boeing, the Houston Texans, Microsoft, Biogen, Volvo, the Washington Wizards, and over 100,000 students and educators across the world. One of his children's books, Different, a story about loving your neighbor, was a bestseller in its category and has been featured in numerous outlets, including the Obama Foundation. Chris's overall mission when speaking is to inspire his audiences with his story of resilience and to unite millions of people with his belief that love is stronger than hate. Welcome to the show, Chris. We are delighted to have you here to amplify your message and share your story. So thanks so much for spending 30 minutes of your time with us today.
Chester, man, thank you. Thank you guys for having me on.
You got it. Now, we've got Janice Perkins, JP, we call her, in the Question Command Center in Wichita, Kansas. She's going to be monitoring the feed. You got questions, you put it to JP. There she is. Wichita, my new favorite city in America. That's where my latest grandson was born. So Chris, welcome to the show. And thanks for sharing your story of resilience and really your story of love. Talk to us about your journey and where this story came from. And I know you've probably told this story several times. I'm sure it's painful every time. And the role that your mom played in your story of resilience and love.
Yeah, man, I say my mom was my everything, right? I think everybody looks at their mom as their hero. She was the provider, priest, protector. And unfortunately, she was taken away from me in a racially motivated mass shooting. So that happened June 17, 2015. And I said the words, love is stronger than hate. So if we just love the way my mom would, the hate won't be anywhere close to where love is. And I forgave my mother's killer. And I had no idea how, big or small that would be. It was on my heart. And I remember the next day, I got tons of different social media followers, and we did this thing on ESPN about bringing people together. And all of a sudden, man, I saw how powerful forgiveness was. And so it was a journey for me, but initially I knew that that was the start. Forgiving my mother's killer was the start of my grieving process, and has allowed me to share like I do today.
Chris, like many, I followed that story of that, horrific day. And I think one of the things that I found so moving was when, members of your congregation, I mean, Mother Emanuel is this, for those of you that don't know, is one of the most famous, churches in your community. I mean, if you're in the southern states, Mother Emanuel, you know exactly where that church is. You know exactly who those ministers are. And when I read the story that the congregants of your church went to the courtroom and vocally prayed for and forgave that young man, that could not have been easy. Tell me a little bit about, in the aftermath, how did your group come together and decide this is what you were going to do and not seek vengeance?
Well, Chester, I want to say first that it wasn't everybody in the church that was affected by it that forgave, because that's not realistic, right? But there were a group of us that actually forgave the killer. And I realize now that forgiveness wasn't for Dylan Roof, a real human being who unfortunately took my mom and 8 of their lives, right? There's a quote that says, "Forgiveness is setting a prisoner free only to later realize that you yourself are the prisoner." And so it allowed me to move forward in my life, right? I don't say I moved on, but it allowed me to move forward because on the other side of forgiveness, I didn't have to look at every single young white male and say, he's got to be racist like the man that took my mom away, right? Forgiveness on the other side of it for me meant, hey, I don't have to have PTSD every time I walk into a building and try to figure out, hey, do I need to protect my family in this way or that way? And so I think mainly people need to think about forgiveness as something that soothes you, not the other person, because my mother's killers never said sorry. But forgiving him, I don't need a sorry. And it's allowed me to do the work that I do today with racial reconciliation, all because of where my stance is on trying to reteach people, unfortunately, that have been taught the wrong thing for generations.
That's so interesting, the way you put that you don't need a sorry. You don't need him to apologize. What you need is to unburden yourself, right? So many times we see families that are just destroyed because they can't let go of that hate, right? They just can't let go. So when was the moment when you decided that you had a platform and you wanted to share that message, that you wanted to become this inspirational speaker, that you wanted to be an advocate for this? When was that moment?
Yeah, it's funny you asked that because, I think back on right after I lost my mom, people would say, "Hey, Chris, we saw you on ESPN. We saw you throw the first pitch out for the Yankees, or we saw you on the Today Show. Would you like to speak to my, small group or my company?" And I would say, "No, I'm not going to stand in front of all these people while they stare at me. I don't know what I want to say or need to say." But I remember one time I watched a video from a guy named Inky Johnson. He's one of my friends and mentors now in this space. And after I got done watching that video, I said, man, if I can make somebody feel half the way this guy just made me feel, that's what I'm going to do in my life. And so I ended up, playing professional baseball, getting drafted by the Cubs and playing a little while. But ultimately, in the back of my mind, I kept saying, if I get opportunities to share my heart, share my mission of unity, then I'm going to do that. And it's grown. It's grown from me doing 3, 4, 5 engagements a year to now doing, 5 or 6 every single month. And I'm grateful that I've had these opportunities. I can't wait to keep doing so.
It's such a powerful message, and one that obviously we need probably now more than ever. Of course, I think every year we can say that with a little more, emotion. Your children's book is such a wonderful idea. Where did that come from, and how did you get the story for the children's book?
Yeah, so I get the opportunity, like I said, to share with companies and colleges and high schools, but I would never feel safe telling my story to a 6 or 7-year-old, right? I don't think it's my place to tell them that my mom was shot 8 times while she was praying because of the color of her skin. That's a really sad thing to tell a little kid, right? And so I said, how can I still get this message across of unity of coming together, of celebrating people without telling them all the gory details. And that's where children's book came into play. And like many people, I didn't know what I was doing with the children's book, right? I just knew the mission and the message that I wanted behind it, to celebrate kids, no matter what their skin color is, no matter what their first language is, no matter where they're from. And so I just asked a million people a million questions. And my goal was to be able to just sell 1,000 books, and hopefully 1,000 families can get it. And I'll never forget, when I first released it, it was like 1,500 books in the first like hour. And so people supported it, and they came out of everywhere to do so. And so that's what the main message is of the story: just bringing kids together and celebrating one another, because we're all different.
It's so great. You teach kids to love. You can teach kids to hate. Let's teach them to love, right? Chris, one of the really fun things about LinkedIn and Facebook and YouTube, we love them so much, is we get this incredibly international audience. So people are tuning in to Ahmed from Egypt, Sophia from the US, Thuria from the UAE, Mohad from India, Carrie from Virginia. I think we know Carrie, actually. Maddie from New York City, Sophia from Maryland. And we've got a question coming in. I'm going to shoot it to JP in the question command center. And I think this is really a deep question from one of our viewers. So JP, time is yours. Ask away.
Hey, Chris. First of all, I want to thank you for being a vessel and being vulnerable and sharing this story, the power of this story, and being vulnerable to enough to let it multiply in other people's lives. So that is just extraordinary. Thank you for that. So the question is, where does the power to forgive, where does it come from?
Yeah, I'd say the power to forgive for me comes from my faith. I'm a man of faith, and I have friends that don't believe in a God or anything like that. But for me, I realize the power of forgiveness for me allows me to be a good father now and not sit and sulk in what happened to me. Now, it doesn't mean that I don't have hard days or tough moments when I miss my mom and I realize, or I remember why she was taken away. I think about it all the time. But forgiveness for me has allowed me to move forward. I'm pretty deliberate in saying move forward and not move on, because I think it's very tough to tell somebody to move on from something that scarred them for life. Right. But I can move forward now. And I use it as fuel for me. I use it as fuel in my mission. And so that's kind of where the power of it's come from, where the whole thought process of forgiveness has come from. I'm a believer that believes I've been forgiven. So who am I not to forgive?
Yeah. Which leads me to my next question. So, Chris, clearly a man of faith, right? Your mom was a woman of faith. You were very active in Mother Emanuel. How do you share faith like you do in a time, as you're saying, a lot of your friends don't believe in God. They're agnostic at best. How do you share your faith and be so confident in a time when it's really kind of almost looked down upon to share your faith? How do you navigate that?
Yeah, and Chester, there's some rooms that I can't share my faith in, and I totally understand that. I respect everybody's beliefs every single day. But even if I wasn't a person of faith, I would want to be. I've been through so much, and after I feel like you've gone through some things, you know what it's like to get on the other side of them. And so for me, when I share with companies or I share with the school or whatever it may be, I don't share from 20 years of studying this or studying that. I share from experience. I share from having to go through the toughest times in my life, and raising teenagers as I was 20 years old, and just trying to be a vessel, like she mentioned earlier. I share from the things I've experienced in my life, and I never take anything away from anybody with whatever belief they may have. I just know the power in what I've seen in my faith. There's two ways you can go when your mom is shot while she's praying. You could say, hey, there's no way there's a creator. Or you can say, I don't know how it happened or why it happened, but I know I need our creator to help me get through this pain. And I went with the latter.
Yeah. We're talking with Chris Singleton. He's an inspirational speaker, former professional baseball player. Where can we find your children's book? Different. How to Love Thy Neighbor, if I got that right.
Yeah, you can find them on Amazon. You can find them at local bookstores. We have them in a lot of local bookstores, but also you can find them chrissingleton.com.
Excellent. So want to take a little break here and do a little commercial. We got a little sponsor here. We'll do a little business and we'll come back. But it's really interesting. You talk about becoming a leader and choosing your path and making a difference. And we encourage people to invest in themselves all the time. And we've got a wonderful sponsor, methodsof.com, and there's all kinds of great courses. Sally Helgeson about how women rise. We've got a great course on there on teamwork. Hortense Le Gentil, who talks about alignment. Marshall Goldsmith, who's the world's greatest executive coach. I mean, if you want to invest in some time, Marshall's your guy. Martin Lindstrom, one of the most brilliant marketers, that I've ever met. Well, because you're listening to our show, if you go to methodsof.com, pick your course, and when you check out, in the checkout box, put Gratitude 2021, you get a 50% discount. It's a pretty good deal. 2021, Gratitude 2021, you get a 50% discount. Go to methodsof.com. Take a screenshot so you don't forget it, and we'll see you there. Well, questions are kind of flooding in here, as I knew they would, Chris. So let's go to JP in the Question Command Center. We got a couple of great questions for you, JP.
Hey, Chris, do you have a story of sharing love to kids and how that has impacted them?
I do. Yeah, I've got a great story. I was actually speaking to an elementary school one time. This is my, way I could finally share with elementary schools by reading my book and not feeling like I need to tell them a very sad story. But there was a girl from Brazil, and it's funny because my wife is from Brazil. And there was a girl who's from Brazil and was struggling, learning English. And she said, in my talk, I mentioned how nobody chooses their first language, and we should never judge somebody or make fun of somebody based on their first language because we didn't choose it. And I remember afterwards, the little girl came up to me and said that she loved that I said that because, sometimes she gets picked on because her English isn't that great. But that day she felt celebrated because she spoke more than one language. So that was a cool little story from one time that I spoke to an elementary school.
I love that answer, Chris. How to make a kid feel, like she belongs. There's an old joke, and you've probably heard it, that if you speak more than two languages, you're multilingual. And if you speak two languages, you're bilingual. But if you only speak one language, you're probably American, right?
Exactly.
How's your Portuguese?
How's
your Portuguese?
Eu entendo mais ou menos, mas eu não falo. Yeah, I understand a little, but I don't speak too much. Yeah.
Tudo bem. Hey, we got another question for you. JP, go ahead.
So, Chris, what about leadership? So why should a leader learn the power of forgiveness? And what are the first steps to forgiveness for them?
Great question.
That's great. Yeah, that's a great question. I think sometimes leaders, they look at whatever they do as like, hey, if I've been wronged, I want to get back at that person. And then oftentimes that person, whether it's a boss, whether it's somebody that wronged you in the past, right, a deal didn't go through, sometimes they're not even thinking about it anymore. And so we think by holding that grudge, by saying in our minds, I'm going to make sure I get back at them, we're one-upping them. But in actuality, they may be living their lives, their businesses may be going well, and we're hindering ourselves based on trying to get revenge at somebody else or something else. And so as a leader, I think forgiveness should be important because, hey, if we're trying to lead not only our teams or our companies, we shouldn't be giving our time and our energy to something that happened maybe 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago. Also with leaders, man, I love talking about diversity because I do a lot of work in the D&I space, and really it's all around empathy. So understanding the stories behind all of our employees, or understanding, what they've gone through, because then you know how to lead them effectively. So there's a bunch of different things I think leaders can do, but forgiveness is definitely one of them to keep moving your company forward and stop thinking about the past.
As you talk, it's so funny. I'm like a lot of our listeners, I'm thinking, yeah, I've held grudges before. And it's been hard for me to let things go. And the person that we're holding the grudge against, like you said, they have no idea. They're completely oblivious to the fact that we're and in a sense, they win twice, right? They've offended you once, and then they've taken up your energy and your goodness a second time in holding that grudge. Well, listen, it's obvious, from your baseball career that you love sports and so on. So talk to me a little bit about some of the lessons you learned while you were playing center field and and trying to hit a curveball. What are some of the lessons you learned from sports?
Yeah, number one, it is very hard to hit a curveball, even harder to hit a slider. So that's one lesson. But also just learning about failure, right? I failed so many times as an athlete, but I never try to let that stop me. There's a quote that I love, a guy named Chuck Swindoll, and he basically said 10% of your life is going to be action, and the other 90% is reaction. And I put that into every aspect of my life, right? I lost, my father, unfortunately, due to alcoholism. So I just think that's 10%. What am I going to do with my 90? And my 90, I'm promising myself and my family that I'll never become an alcoholic, right? I think about my 10% losing my mom, the way that I lost her in a racially motivated mass shooting. But my 90% is how I respond to it by saying, I want to teach love and unity everywhere that I can. And remind people, because sometimes we forget that nobody chooses their skin color, their first language, where they're born, how much they had as a kid. So we should never judge people based on those things. And hopefully they'll never judge me based on them. So I think sports just taught me that, things happen, but it's all about your response to them.
Excellent. I love the question about, do you have a story about a child that, you shared the story with and they had a reaction? Do you have a story about a leader? I mean, you've spoken at some wonderful companies in Boeing, the Houston Texans, and so on. After you've spoken, give me a story, and I'm sure you have many, where what you said impacted a leader, a grown-up this time.
Yeah, and this is a pretty large hospital. I won't say the hospital's name, but I remember a leader, came up to me afterwards and said, "Hey, Chris, it's actually refreshing to see that you're not prejudiced, you're not racist, for lack of better words, after you lost your mother in a racially motivated mass shooting." He said he actually experienced something as a young man where he was jumped. He was jumped by 4 young African-American men. And he said he's always held a grudge and kind of, looked sideways at young Black men because of his experience. And I think sometimes we take one experience and we shape everybody in that demographic around what that one experience was. For me, if that was the case, then I would look at all young white men and say that they're racist. And that's not the case. But it was intriguing. It was intriguing that day he said, now he realizes that, number one, forgiveness is a choice, but also racism is a choice, and you can be retaught and relearned things that you were, mistaught for years and years. So it was just interesting that this guy is a leader of hundreds and hundreds of people, but he even admitted to me that young Black men just held like a certain, it was a certain dislike that he had towards them because of his experience. And I try to just reshape his mind that we can't just base every single thought or opinion about a group of people based on one experience that we had. I mean, I think it was definitely it was moving for him, for sure.
It's such a powerful message, and it's such a simple message, and yet it's so hard for most people. Like you say, we are a product of our experiences, and how we react to those experiences, for good or ill, really does determine who we are.
Yeah.
Well, we got another great question from JP in the Question Command Center in beautiful Wichita, Kansas. Let's wrap it up here. Go ahead, JP.
Hey, Chris, thank you so much for describing what you just were around reframing our experiences too. I love that. So the question is, how do you see love related to rigidity or resistance in our culture, in our organizations, in that DEI space that you're working in? And thank you for that.
Of course. Well, I look at it as learning, right? And I don't have to learn to love country music, or I don't have to love a band like Skrillex, right? But I think if I'm leading and people that I lead love this or love that, I should at least learn about it. One of the examples that I use is we should be listening to learn and not listening to tell somebody why they're wrong. And unfortunately, right now, in a lot of ways, people are listening. Hey, I want to have a conversation, but I'm only listening to tell you why you're wrong and prove that I'm right. I was watching this movie with my son a couple of days ago, and it was about, it's called Wonder, the movie was. And one of the scenes was, hey, if you have an opportunity to be right or to be kind, choose to be kind. And I think leaders should definitely do that. Lead in a space where, of course, you want to hold them to a certain standard, but you also want to learn their experiences. And even if they're wrong, there's a way that you can have that conversation to still learn from their perspective while educating them.
I love that. If you have a chance to be right or be kind, be kind. You're getting a lot of love in the chat box here, which doesn't surprise me, Chris. Monique from Pennsylvania says, "What an inspiring speaker." Kudos, Chris. So good for you. Hey, we just finished a book on anxiety in the workplace. So talk to me a little bit about what you're seeing, particularly in your space, and what's causing all this anxiety, and how forgiveness can maybe tamp down some of that anxiety. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think especially right now, it's a do it now, results now type of environment in everything. Unfortunately, so when you have quick deadlines or you don't know what the future holds, it's obvious why we have so much anxiety in the workplace. Even at home right now, whether it's with your kids at school, don't know if it's going to be virtual, in person, hybrid, or whatever it may be. But I find peace in just knowing what I can do presently, right now, and everything that I do. So whether it's me being a great dad right now and taking my son to school or picking him up, whether it's me trying to work out the best presentation I can for today's audience. Like, I think anxiety comes from trying to think too much in the future or what will happen or what could happen instead of just focusing right now. Forgiveness for me has allowed me to speak the way that I do right now. And it's a journey for me. It doesn't mean that I'll always be doing this, but that's what it's done for me right now. And I think just thinking too much in the future or, having a 10-year goal is definitely great, but just focus on today. And I think some of that peace will come over you.
So what do you say, Chris, to people that say, oh, forgiveness is great? People take advantage of you. As a leader, if you're too forgiving, people are going to take advantage. You're going to be seen as a weak leader. What's your response to that?
Yeah, you can forgive somebody and still hold them accountable, right? So people look at me and my story and they say, "So Chris, you've forgiven your mother's killer. Wow, okay. He shot your mom 8 times while she was praying, and you forgave him." Yes, I have. Does that mean I'm happy about what happened? Absolutely not. Does that mean I want him to be walking on the streets right now? Absolutely not. You can hold people accountable while you still forgive them. My mother's killer received the death penalty. Is that what I wanted? No, but should he be held accountable? Absolutely. And so that's that way in every single way possible, whether it's in the workplace, whether it's with our kids, right? We can forgive them, but still hold them accountable and say, hey, you were supposed to eat all your dinner, right? I love you. You threw your dinner on the floor. I still love you. I forgive you, but hey, there's no dessert tonight. So you can definitely hold people accountable while still forgiving them. Yeah.
That sounds like a recent experience you maybe had with your own child there, Chris. Good for you. You learned how to be a dad.
3-year-old,
hey,
man.
Thoraya from the UAE says, yes, choose to be kind. Always be kind. Hey, we're wrapping up here. So what's one thing you want people to remember from our conversation today?
Yeah, man, my mission is pretty simple. It sounds hard, but I think it's pretty simple. And that's just to teach people and remind them that, no matter what political party, no matter where we're from or, where we're born, where we live, I think we should love people. Now, we may not always like them, but we should always love them. There should be a certain level of respect for every human being that is on the face of the earth, whether they're in Australia, Afghanistan, United States. It doesn't matter where you're at or where you're from. I'm going to love you regardless of it.
That's great. Okay. In 10 words or less, where did you find your gratitude today, Chris?
I found my gratitude in my family. That's
excellent.
Simple.
Okay. Another quick commercial. We're going to wrap things up here. Thanks so much for our gratitude community for joining us. By the way, invest in yourself. Go to methodsof.com. Make sure you pick out one of those great leadership courses. And when you do checkout, go to Gratitude 2021. You get a 50% discount. Are you kidding me? What a deal. A little commercial from our publisher. Alan Mullally, the guy that saved the Ford Motor Company, said of leading with gratitude, I love, love, love this book. And then a not so subtle call to action. Buy me, buy me, buy me. Hey, listen, we've had a lot of fun with you. You always say, give us 30 minutes. We'll give you a great information, great inspiration, and a roadmap to a life of gratitude at work and at home. Big shout out to our crew behind the scenes. We got JP in Wichita, Kansas. We got Christy in Atlanta, Georgia. We got Brent, who's in Austin, Texas. I'm coming to you live and in color from the Adirondacks. Chris Singleton from the I think the church capital of the world, Charleston, South Carolina. Thanks so much for being with us. Turn up the music, Brent. We're going to dance it out here. Show us your best moves, Chris. Like you're playing center field. You know what I'm saying? Just give us a little rhythm there. Dance it up. Hey, everybody. Be kind, be grateful, be forgiving. And we'll see you next week. Same time, same place, same bat channel. Thanks so much for your time. See you again soon, everybody.